Hello and welcome to the NeuroDivergent Fitness Podcast. My name is Megan. I'm one of your hosts.
My name's Ryan. I am also one of your hosts.
And we are both personal trainers. Oh, we got to add our fun fact. What's your fun fact for today?
Oh, my name is Ryan, and my fun fact for today is that cats don't see you as human. They just think you're a weird, dumb cat.
Oh, your cat thinks you're a cat?
Yeah, your cat thinks you're a cat. It just thinks you're kind of weird.
Yeah. Yeah. And they want to play with you and they think that you can play like a cat.
Yeah, at like 4 a.m.
Oh, yeah. I didn't know that, but that sounds fun for you. Anyway. Okay. What's my fun fact? I don't even know what my fun fact is. My fun fact is that I like plants, and you can see them around me. Did I already say that one? I don't know. Anyway, today we are talking about the human movement method intensive that took place 2 weeks ago now.
Yeah, probably about that.
Okay, cool. And this was a 2-day intensive that Ryan led and went through his method, the human movement method, and had a bunch of professionals, including myself there, of different backgrounds to learn about the method and go through how you would apply it with your clients in classes. And actually, personally, there were a good amount of people who were performers there who are going to probably take those exercises and use them.
Yeah, I would actually say that the vast majority of the people there are what I would consider to be advanced, like, practitioners, but not, I would not say that the majority were trainers. About half was trainers.
Half were trainers. And then you also had massage therapists. You had a good group of people who were from the aerial art. Aerial art?
Aerial arts.
Yeah, arts. So a lot of aerial artists, and it was interesting for me to listen to them because their main concern was how do I not fall, and how do I prevent injuries while I'm up in the air and I'm holding myself up and I'm like gravity's part of the equation. And for me, I mostly deal with people and myself relative to the ground. So just a little different perspective.
Well, and yeah, and it also creates, and different training styles create different common issues. And what's funny is, like, you would think that aerialists have really strong shoulders because they're always hanging from them. And in reality, that can actually destabilize a shoulder. So they were coming at it from a very different perspective. Like, even their point of contact was different. The average person's point of contact is going to be their feet.
Yeah. Yeah.
From a performance level, their point of contact is either their hips or their arms.
Like, how am I staying connected to this thing in the air? That's the thing about. And it was funny. So we're going to kind of go through what we went over in the intensive and how I'm going to plan to use it moving forward. And I have some questions for Ryan about moving forward in terms of other intensives too towards the end. But yeah, fun.
I didn't know about that.
Oh, okay. um so we're gonna start at the top. So the first day we went over posture and gait, and this is super fun, at least for me, because you can tell a lot about someone's body just by looking at them and seeing what imbalances are going on. And doing it with other professionals who have the same lens is super cool because you get to see different perspectives. So like I'm paying attention to people's shoulders a lot, people's hips a lot, people's feet a lot. But in the posture assessment, we got into like hands, neck, tilts, forward, back, all that good stuff. One of the funny things that happened is that there's a lot of aerial artists, and you were just talking about how their shoulders are unstable. So, meanwhile, all of their shoulders are like elongated. Maybe not elongated is the right word, but definitely not like
They're not
super stiff up top.
right.
So one of the things you could tell that my background was a little bit different because I was just not moving at the top, which was funny. But yeah, so the posture stuff was super cool. I don't know how often you get to talk about posture with people who are not your clients or other or other professionals. But yeah, how often does that happen for you?
Yeah, so a really weird story. So I used to work with a fella who was a retired physical therapist,
Yes.
and um, we actually had a really good relationship. He's since passed away, but he actually, when I owned a gym in Ann Arbor, we had a reference library in the gym that were all books that he was giving me from his own library. And we used to have this massive library. And we used to talk about gait analysis. And
Mm-hmm.
he asked me at one point, he says, "When did you start doing gait analysis?" So I've just always done it. So what do you mean you always did it? I said, well, I said, I actually picked it up in martial arts. We used to do these things called walking kata, where the idea was two people would walk toward each other and you would pass one another. You would do this multiple times. And at some point, something would happen. And you would have to work from that place. That was the idea. And so I learned to watch movement in that context. And then I learned throughout my career that when I wanted to find a problem, if I watched people walk, I could see it globally in the movement pattern.
Mm-hmm.
And then he brought to my attention that when he was in school, they taught this methodology to the top 10% of their physical therapy class.
Only the top
Only the
10%?
top 10%. So they took the best students and then they mentored them up to that place. So he brought me a bunch of manuals on it, and I started studying those manuals. And so he, for a very long time, was my conversation partner around that particular topic.
Yeah.
And he was a client, a very interesting client. I've always joked, I took on a rule with him that I now use with most clients, and it's that I won't tell them what they're going to do before they do it. Particularly if I want a certain outcome, and the outcome I want is whatever the natural outcome is.
Yeah.
Because I want to know where the problem is. And it was because if I told him exactly what he was going to do, he would find a way around it unconsciously.
Oh, like what would be a good example of that?
It would be like we were trying to get his knee to externally rotate so his ankle would be in a neutral position. Like he would do it in the drill, and then when it was time to integrate the drill, it would all go backward again.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And it was just, it wasn't him consciously doing it. It was just he was physically aware enough that, let's say one of these things had a root in psychology, he could work around it. And so I learned a lot of interesting things, not just learning from him, but also working with him. And his advanced level of knowledge made him, in a lot of ways, and he would laugh about this even if I said it, in some ways it made him a terrible client.
Yeah. Do you find
Because
that
he
he
was,
was overthinking? So he was
oh
just like
yeah,
overthinking everything? Yeah.
yes, yeah, way overthinking it. So,
Yes.
but he was even consciously aware of it. Like,
Aware
so
of
he was a
overthinking.
very
Yeah.
interesting model for posture, movement, but then also peer conversation.
Yeah. It's interesting that the top 10% were the only ones who got it, when now, if you don't look at posture and gait when you're assessing, I'm not exactly sure how you're gonna
Well,
get that. I mean,
right.
you're gonna get information from movement, but those are such clear signs when you're looking at gait and posture.
I mean, it is so, let's put it this way. It is such a cornerstone of what we
Yes,
do.
cornerstone.
I am going to Poland a week from today to teach it at an international fitness conference because it is such a strong model.
Yeah.
That is, and it is so succinct. It requires very little time,
Very little equipment.
and it allows you then to objectively gather assessment material that you can go back and review and see progression very, very easily.
Yes. Yes. 100%. And you can use it as just a gauge for as you're making progression and if something goes back. So like I feel like when you work with, or what I found is when you work with clients for good amount of time is that they always go through phases, right? So like they're gonna get super motivated, they're gonna be like, oh my God, I'm doing the thing, I'm doing it. And then yeah. And then you're like, oh, we've entered into the I don't want to do my exercises outside of the gym time.
Mm-hmm.
And then we dip down, and then they will be like, oh, I just realized I'm resorting back. I'm gaining the weight back. My shoulders are imbalanced again. I don't feel good. Any of those things. And then they come back up, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's part of the process, part of the process. I had a client the other day where I was going through some pictures, and it looks like we're gonna have to address your shoulders again. And it was like almost like you just go through phases.
Real quick. That's one of
Yeah.
the reasons that in my own programming, on the days that I don't feel like I can do a whole workout, those are the days that I do active recovery by just
Yeah.
doing my calibration programming. So instead
Mm-hmm.
of doing complicated, big, crazy, wild stuff, I stand on one foot and I do the resistance band exercises on my legs, and I work on my ankle flexibility, and like I tinker with stuff, and I move. It gives me dynamic movement that supports my higher level function, but you can't perform at that level every single
Yeah.
day. And you certainly
Yeah.
can't live in calibration mode either. Like
Yes.
it's only responsible to make it. Like I think last week I did rebound Monday, I did ballistic Tuesday, I did resistance band Wednesday, I did a calibration Thursday, I did a calibration Friday, but I did a long run. I did like a 4 or 5 mile run. And then on Saturday, I actually did another ballistic day, and then Sunday I didn't do anything. And then Monday I didn't do
Yeah.
anything either. I just didn't feel up to it. So
Yeah. Yeah. And I also have recently realized I have some new clients who are like super ready to go. They're in their 50s. They're moving. They're like, they call themselves old. And I'm like, you don't even, that, I don't even, why are we even talking about that? It doesn't even cross my mind. But they just started. So like after a day of training with me, you're gonna be sore.
mhm.
Like we did some calibration stuff at the beginning, and one person had a frozen shoulder, one person had the
Oh
bunch of
yeah,
the
yeah.
good stuff. Their
Yeah.
shoulder's feeling so much better already after a week. After a week. You know that exercise? The exercise where you are on the floor and then you're lifting up your arm on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the first day she did it on the one side without the frozen shoulder, and she was like, okay. She did it on the other side. She was like, oh my God. And I was like barely moved off the ground. And then this week it moved off the ground. It was like, I would say like improved 50%
You're
already.
talking about
So,
where you're laying flat on your stomach and pulling backward
yep.
this
Thank you
way.
for
Okay.
getting that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And range of
So
motion conditioning for everybody out
what
there.
is it?
And range of
What was
motion conditioning.
and range of motion? Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So anyway, the point is that when you are also beginning a new workout routine and you're getting sore the next day and you're not feeling up to it and you don't feel like you can do a full thing,
Oh.
you have those options. And I think that is like the biggest thing in terms of people staying consistent, having options. Like you can't make it to the gym, but you have a pull-up bar and stairs. You have plenty of resources to get your heart rate up, get the job done, put some work in that is like gonna play into your larger program.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. Okay, back to the intensive. Okay, so we went through posture, we went through gait. Um, anything we want to talk about on those before
My
we go to the
favorite
next
was
one?
when you guys evaluated me and suddenly realized that I'm a mess. That was the most hilarious thing in the world, because it was like, like there's this belief or attitude that, well, you know all this stuff, therefore it must. And honestly, like I actually feel pretty good right now. But I
Yeah.
also acknowledge that, as you guys learned, like I have nerve damage in certain places. I carry around a bunch of injuries. Like those things should not determine whether or not or how you move. But for me, my commitment to lifelong health, wellness, fitness, and movement has determined that I needed to find the way to support myself through that whole process. And just because I do this program doesn't mean it looks, the way it looks does not necessarily dictate whether or not it's effective or proper. Like,
yes.
And this is the reason the human movement method is not a program. This is not a program. You don't go online and download the 12-week program and run it and get washboard abs. That's not how this works. It is a system it's a constructive lens. It's an archetypical lens that allows us to look at movement and look at people and identify where there are system issues. And then it allows us to calibrate those issues. And the reason I like to use the word calibrate is because it's about bringing everything into appropriate tension. It's not about fixing anything. We're not fixing. There's nothing to fix. What you have is what you have. And what we're trying to do is expand the loci of movement. We're trying to make you capable of more dynamic movement in more conditions safely.
Mm-hmm.
That's it.
Yeah. What I love about doing posture and gait and watching literally any human have something going on with their body is just information back to you on what that human patterns are, what their patterns are.
Yeah.
And because like you're never going to have somebody where like they're perfectly aligned on both sides all the time. Nothing's in balance. No, that's just not how it works. And I like to think about athletes because I think that people glorify athletes and they're like, well, they must be like the healthiest and must be doing their thing, which we've talked about before. But my favorite part about that is that if you look at the posture of an athlete, you can tell what their sport is, right? And you can tell their patterns. So it's not that they're better or worse. These are the things that their sport requires to do over and over and over again.
Right.
And that's what's going to show up in their body. And it's the same thing for just daily life.
The body is an adaptive machine. Mm-hmm. It's an adaptive machine. Now understand that the way we think of that in mechanical terms, those concepts oppose each other. A machine is something that's very tightly wound. It runs in a very specific way. The amount of energy you feed into it directly affects the output. That's a machine. Mm-hmm. If it's not running inside that tightly wound calibration, it will fall apart or it will explode, as opposed to the laws of thermodynamics. So thermodynamics is one of the most important sciences you could ever possibly learn. Basically, I can take a steam engine, I can continuously feed coal into it until one of two things happens. Either I run out of coal and it stops working, or the boiler overextends and explodes. That's it. The only two ways, I can either put a governor on that system so that the boiler doesn't explode, or I can limit how much coal I'm putting into it. But that's how I affect the output. With humans, it's the other way around. Because with a human, the way this machine works is everything is cyclical.
Yeah.
It's not a linear output. We as humans go through a preparation, action, reflection, recovery. That's our model. That's not a mechanical model. And so, but you have to understand, only one of those is action.
Yeah.
And for example, a lot of people, like when we talk about calories in and calories out. Let's use that as an example.
My favorite topic.
Well, that's thermodynamics. You're now treating a body the same way that you treat a steam engine.
Yeah.
Okay?
I thought you were going to go into every calorie is a calorie. Or every calorie is the same.
Well, not exactly.
Okay, go ahead.
So if I'm determining mass, it makes perfect sense. Calories in, calories out. If I eat X amount of calories, I either maintain the size that I am, I grow, or I get smaller. It says nothing about the composition of that size at all. Okay? So that's one thing. But on the other side of it is it's the idea that it's a linear curve. And it's not. Because humans, like for example, if I starve myself, it will lower my basal metabolic rate. I'm an adaptive machine. My body can get more efficient or less efficient depending on what its need is. So if I'm conditioning really, really hard and I'm working my body really, really hard and simultaneously starving it, the system is being pulled in two directions at once. And so it wants to be more efficient in that the basal metabolic rate wants to drop, particularly because the output is so high. That doesn't work because to a certain degree, what's going to happen is in my rest and recovery, in my reflection and recovery phases, I'm not going to get all of it back. And so what's going to happen is my performance curve is actually going to drop over time. Do you know what I'm saying?
It sounds like what you're saying is that like you have no more resources when you stretch too thin.
Right. And it's also you can't treat your body like a steam engine because it doesn't work in a linear function. Yeah. The body has to work in these cycles. This is how animals work. We hunt, we eat, we groom, we rest. That's what we do. Mm-hmm. And grooming and resting are systems of maintenance. And and acquisition of calories used to be, the acquisition of calories was the process. We now call that exercise. We've actually broken the acquisition of calories into two separate layers. We now have activity and consumption, where it used to be that activity and consumption were joined. Does that make sense?
You mean like in the hunter-gatherer phase?
Yeah. You used to have to go find food. And so if you found more food than you expended, you survived.
I mean, technically, we still have to find food. It's just like a little bit less effort than...
Yeah. We're just, the dynamic's very different. But there was once a time where those two things were directly connected.
Yeah.
And they're not. And our biology is set up for them to be directly connected. And
now it's the instantaneous, I have it.
Yeah, so you were either in an active phase or you were in a recovery phase. Mm-hmm. But you can break those into 4 phases that you can kind of take to anything. Mm-hmm. So my point ultimately is that like humans are adaptive machines. We need that time to adapt. If we're always on output, there's no adaptation. The system just breaks.
Yes, this goes for your emotional state as well, from what I've learned.
I'm just saying it's a model that can apply to biological systems of any kind.
You're like, I will stick in this part of the science, not venture into that part of the science. But it does, so it does tie in. I think you'll agree with this part. It does tie in to a general theory of the human movement method where you are zooming in at certain parts, joints, and then tying it back into a larger whole of movement.
That's what we do. We look at the whole. It's literally it's a recursive process. You look at the whole.
It's a what process?
Recursive. It's a loop that feeds into itself.
Oh, okay.
It's a loop that feeds into itself. So what do? I look at the process.
Yeah.
I focus in on a point.
Yep.
And then I go back out and I look at the process. And I either need to move to the next point, or I need to go back to the same point, or we just keep an eye on the whole until we find a zone that we have to zoom back into and then come back out of. I mean, that's what you do with your car when it breaks.
I wouldn't know about that, but I'm just kidding. Sorry. I have like a lot of jokes for some reason.
Megan's got a thing about cars, everybody.
I have a fear of cars. If I can find a class that's like how to be a mechanic for like a workshop, like how to fix the most common parts, things that go wrong with your car, so I'm not afraid. It's either that or I'm going to move somewhere where I'm never going to have to drive again.
Go audit a community college class.
Oh, I see. Yeah, I could do that. I did look into that for anatomy classes, and it's a little bit more work than I anticipated. I was going to do that. Like, not the actual the class, yes. But anyway, what was I going to say?
So we're talking
Uh,
about how in human movement method, we go from what we call granular to global.
oh, yes. Okay. So why I think it's so important that you zoom in and then you zoom out and like there's both pieces is because I think what happens a lot of times is that you zoom in, you fix it, and then you don't realize what's happening elsewhere in the system. For
Mm-hmm.
example, we were just talking about this, but I have a client injured her knee. Okay. Actually, this is relevant to my own injury as well.
Mm-hmm.
You hurt your knee, one side. Okay. So you go to PT. What is physical therapy? You go to physical therapy. What do? They give you a series of exercises to address just the knee.
Mm-hmm.
What's happening in this process? You're putting all of your force, your weight, your whole gait is all favoring the opposite side. So what does that do on the other side? Your hip starts hurting. Your glute is like, why am I working so hard? You start developing gait imbalances. And so you're zooming back out and you need to address both, right? But so you might have fixed the knee, but the whole system altogether is still out of balance. So,
Right.
yeah.
Well, in knee orientation specifically, it's really funny because in the rotational engine theory, I talk about all the rotational units and I address the knee directly, and the knee is not a rotational unit.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I address the knee because it is an area that, if injured, can affect the system globally. Lower extremity injuries have global effects.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so if you have a lower extremity injury, everything from a mildly broken toe from running it into, like the bed, the foot of a couch or something, all the way up to a knee injury, to a hip injury. Like one of the things that we talked about at the seminar that I thought that I try really hard to drive home is that your pelvis and your hips aren't the same thing.
Oh, you did. You want to explain that again? Because I'm like not even sure I fully understood.
Yeah, it's really hard for people to get, but basically you have to understand that okay. So from the rotational engine theory, there's a couple of places that get rotational torque from. Okay, my hips give me rotational torque. My shoulders give me rotational torque, but very specifically, my pelvis and my ribs give me rotational torque.
Got it.
Okay, my hip is connected to my pelvis.
Got it.
Right? My hips, my hip joints are mounted to the pelvis for structural stability.
Okay.
But the pelvis moves independently of the hips, and the hips move independently of the pelvis. But there's a sequence that is supposed to occur in how they move. And when that sequence is disrupted, you have global problems.
Okay, so the muscles that tie into the hip are...
Well, your glutes, your rotators, all of that.
Okay.
And what's even funny...
I'm trying to go through the difference. What are the difference?
Okay.
What muscles are the hips?
So let's imagine we're just looking at let's actually start from the spine. So let's say we're just talking about the thoracic spine versus the pelvis, because those are the two rotational components of the spine, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, what mounts those two together and allows that rotation to take place is your whole core.
Yeah.
And your lats, and. Okay? So that's for the pelvis. Now, for your legs, what we're talking about are your hip flexors, are your glutes, and so on and so forth. Now, where it gets interesting is how your quads and hamstrings are attached to your pelvis and your lower leg.
Yeah.
But are not connected to your hips. They assist. They are not drivers of the hips. The hips either rotate or go through flexion and extension through their own systems. So the psoas and the iliacus, those are hip flexors. Your glutes, your AB and adductors drive you into, your adductors are not part of that equation. So your glutes, for example, drive you into extension. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Now, lateral stability of the hip, for example, is not at the hip. Lateral stability of the leg comes from your AB and AD ductors in the frontal plane.
Yeah.
So
Side to side.
right, same thing. The positioning of, we'll say so we're all talking about knee position now. So your knee is more directly linked to your pelvis in a lot of ways than it is to your hip joint.
Yeah, I feel that. Yes, that makes sense.
So now what's interesting is that when the knee hurts and it is unstable, that is because of rotational issues at the hip. Because if the knee is moving in space, side to side, which it's not supposed to do, that's either because it's not being held properly at the ankle or at the hip level. Those are rotational issues. If we're dealing with the knee is not moving properly through flexion extension, that's a pelvis issue. Yeah. If we're dealing with hip pain from running, that is a poor positioning of the pelvis versus flexion extension of the hip. What I mean by that is let's say my hip flexor is so tight that when I'm going into extension, the psoas pulls my pelvis out of alignment with my core, and there's rotational breakdown.
Yes, that makes sense.
Right? So, but that's a synergy problem. That's not a direct cause effect problem. That's a timing and movement synergy issue. That's not release your hip flexor and it'll be fine. No, it won't. No, it won't, because there's a timing problem. And that timing problem is coming from somewhere. And that tight hip flexor is coming from somewhere.
Do you mean like sequence of movements?
Yeah, sequence of timing matters. Synergistic timing matters. And joint stability matters. We gauge stability through alignment, but alignment does not dictate stability.
Right. Yes.
So just because you put the joint in the right place doesn't mean it's stable. It means that you have to control it in that space three-dimensionally, and that's where the timing and movement synergy comes in. This is a layer beneath what we even talked about at the seminar, right? Like, we didn't go this deep into it.
No, we didn't.
Yeah.
No. We mostly got into common postural issues that go on, for lack of a better term, and protocols to go through for each of those.
Yeah. We talked about how to identify and affect joint stability. So what I call the joint stability protocol model, which is where we use movement and postural assessment and gait assessment to identify the joints that are unstable and then bring those joints into stability, or identify the joints that are, well, let me rephrase that. There's a spectrum of stability. You're either hypermobile or you're hypomobile. So
yeah, there was someone who was hypermobile at the intensive, and the cueing is completely different.
Yeah, it's totally different, because people that are hypermobile need a higher level of muscular control. People that are hypomobile need to expand their loci of movement. Yeah. So for some people, their loci of movement is too big and they can't control the joints in space. For other people, their loci of movement is impeded. But what happens when that happens? So let's say you have one stiff hip. Well, that's going to come out as lower back pain, opposite knee pain, and neck pain. Because everything's moving around that one joint that's not moving properly. Yeah. So, the way that we do that is by re-educating the joint, not making it more flexible or strengthening it or whatever. We go through a whole process of re-educating the joint, and then re-educating the joint above and below that joint, and then integrating that into the whole.
Yeah. That is why just resorting to stretching is not the answer. Because oftentimes, and I have this with a lot of people who used to dance, comes across with performers a lot. It's like you want to keep stretching, you want to elongate, you want to get a greater range of motion. But if you are not strengthening in those positions, then you end up with sometimes even greater issues and lack tons of stability in those areas.
Right. And the person that was hypermobile at our seminar was a previous dancer.
Yep. And I feel like you see that a lot too. I have a lot of clients who are dancers and they're super quick to do the releases and the mobilization, but the strengthening, they're like, oh, it's fine.
Well, that's like when I work with people, they say, well, when I roll everything, it feels better, but I don't have an hour every day to roll everything. I'm like, nobody's expecting you to. You're not supposed to stay in that place. You're supposed to move on. But the thing is, people are resistant to moving on.
Yeah. And I think that they have the roles, they do the thing, and like the reality is that once you move on, you still have that to come back to if you need it.
If you need it, it's a tool. That's the thing is this is why I don't consider myself a trainer. I'm gonna tell you a secret. I don't believe I'm a trainer. In my own mind, I'm not a trainer. In my own mind, I'm an educator. I educate people. I help them understand how their body moves, why it moves a certain way, why they might be experiencing what they're experiencing. And can I be half right and half wrong? Yeah, I'm half right and half wrong all the time. But the point is that it's not really about how 100% anatomically exactly correct it is. As I'll often say, I don't know, it could be a ligament, it could be a tendon, it could be inflammation, it could be all these things. I don't have an x-ray machine and an MRI and all that. And honestly, it really doesn't matter. What we know is that if your ankle's collapsing and your knee hurts, if we restore stability to the ankle, the knee in time will remodel and get better.
And what I love about this process is that when you simplify it down, what we're doing is we're looking at patterns and what happens over time, right? And how can we readjust so that your patterns are not creating pain, as you like to talk about, shearing force, and all of the things that people do complain about, despite like what the technical name is behind it.
Yeah. Like you don't need to diagnose something to resolve it. Like nobody needs to walk in and be like, well, the lateral collateral ligament inside your knee has a grade 2 tear, and we found out by injecting you with contrasting dye and then moving you through this machine and yada yada yada, and like none of that needs to be known. Like that's unnecessary.
It's unnecessary, and just like if you were to go see a talk therapist and the moment you got in, they're like, oh, actually, this is wrong with you. 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 You'd be like, okay, goodbye.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's one of those things where our understanding of biology is still, let's put it this way, our understanding of quantum physics compared to original Newtonian physics is light years ahead of where we're at than where we are biologically. Biologically, our understanding of the body is still pretty much at Newtonian physics level. Okay. And it doesn't matter.
I didn't know where you were going with that.
What's that?
I didn't know where you're going with that.
No, we're still, well, the thing is, if you get high enough in quantum physics, Newtonian physics makes no sense. But it's a basic framework to understand why when an apple falls from a tree, and we can kind of get that, and yada, yada, yada. Same thing biologically. We're still at that level where we're really just seeing the apple fall from the tree. Because we're not looking at the systems as a whole. We're still looking at them as a series of chain reactions. And what we are doing in the human movement method and in the rotational engine theory and in the joint stabilization protocols is we're saying, okay, both can be true. You can have granular issues. You can have an issue at the ankle, and we can step back and have a conversation about how that's affecting the whole. And then we can go back and work on the ankle while also alleviating the pain at the whole level, understanding that our goal is to do this over time. We're at the beginning, we're going to work on the ankle and chase these other things around. And then in the end, we're going to mainly be doing global stuff, and as little things pop up, we're going to chase them around.
Yes. 100%. So pretty much by the end of the intensive, it was a pretty clear idea of how you address specific joints if they were going wrong. One of the protocols that I liked the most that I don't think we've talked about is I think you called it multi-layered syndrome or many-layered or something layered.
Called layered.
Layered. Just layered. Layered syndrome? What do you call it?
Layered syndrome. It's
Layered
like upper
syndrome.
cross, lower cross, layered.
Yeah. And so the reason I really liked layered syndrome is because oftentimes you have people who are come in with like from the top, shoulders down, from like the feet up. Yeah.
It's every direction, man. It's everywhere.
It's every direction.
Yep.
And the
got
reality
one arm
is
turned
that, like,
in, the other one's rolling back. You got their head on sideways. That actually just tweaked my back. Not doing that again. Oh, that was terrible.
Okay. You're like, no more examples.
Yeah, no more overdoing it.
Yeah.
Apparently, I'm not supposed to twist my spine this way and arch backward and stick my head forward. That's not supposed to happen.
And this, my friends, is how dancers end up in physical therapy. So, anyway, and they could do that same motion repeatedly.
Yep.
I'm pretty sure. Anywho, the reason I like it is because, back to layered syndrome, is that if you have one session with somebody once a week, 60 minutes, there's no way if I see all of these imbalances going on that I can focus on, especially a new client, the whole shoulder, the whole foot, the whole hip, and once you start like getting into the nitty gritty, what I realized also from the intensive is that the ankle is different from the foot. Yes.
I mean, yes, but no, but yes, but no, right? Like, so.
Yes. And no. Yes. So yes and no. Like, they're not disconnected.
Nope.
But there is a difference between someone who has ankle instability versus someone who has a collapsed arch.
Oh, yeah. Well, and so a person has ankle instability. The question is, why?
Why? Yes. And it could be a collapsed arch, but doesn't have to necessarily be.
Right. So we don't stop at ankle instability.
Yes. We
don't stop there. We say, okay, what's above and below that? What's causing that? And it's a constant loop of evaluation, which I understand 100%. Is hard to learn. Like, and this is why I'm working on my end to build better models for people to understand this process and shorten that curve. But no, this is why Human Movement Method isn't a book and it's not a program. It's something that a skilled person needs to understand and then be able to translate. So for me, this is why I've decided that I'm working primarily with trainers and body workers, is because there's a certain amount of information that you need to get it.
Yeah. Okay, here's my question to you. When are you going to teach phases 4 through 100?
Right now it's 4 through 6. When I have them properly quantified and codified down. You have to understand that this is this is all based in something I learned back as a martial artist. So you have to understand that I spent a decade of my life studying martial arts and that I took it very seriously. And all of this stems from that. And the art that I studied, one of the arts that I studied is called Taijutsu. Taijutsu just means body art. It just means a body art. And one of the people that I kind of deified in my process as a younger person was a guy named Takamatsu Sensei. And Takamatsu Sensei said that everyone has a Taijutsu. It's not about Taijutsu. Like yeah, we teach Taijutsu, but like everyone has a Taijutsu. Mm-hmm. Shoemakers have a Taijutsu, farmers have a Taijutsu. Everyone moves a certain way. So back to your original point, you just said this earlier in the podcast,
with the
what people
patterns.
do, it shapes their bodies. So
Yeah.
apparently, if you were born in 1850 and you were Japanese, the way you said that was everyone has a taijutsu. Everyone does. So what we're learning, what I'm trying to do is take that lens that I got from martial arts, where we learned taijutsu through kata, and I'm saying, okay, a kata is just a model. So what we're doing is we're breaking movement patterns down into models. And we're teaching models.
Yeah.
And then if you do the model, it calibrates your body back into appropriate tensegrity. Does that versus at the time we were learning combatives, it had nothing to do with that. It was like, nope, when two bodies interact in space, this is how you win. That was what mattered. Okay.
Yeah.
What we're doing over here is we're saying when one body interacts with the universe, when one body interacts with the world, it moves through these profiles.
Yeah.
And it does so with these qualities. And if we can identify those qualities and those patterns, and we can bring them down to a model level and transmit them,
yeah,
you have a complete system. And when I say a complete system, I mean it gives a foundation for movement education that you can then use as a platform for any other form of movement that you want. Football, hockey, dance, whatever. But understand that the minute you go outside that model, you're now testing it in the field. If I take a car off-road, I'm going to mess that. There's a chance that the car is going to get messed up.
Yeah.
So
it's just going to happen.
It's just going to happen. So you have to understand that my perspective is built in that environment. And so what I'm trying to do is build better models and more accurate systems to convey to trainers so that they can then get those models and convey them to their clients.
Got it. So what was the name of that phrase you just used? Body art?
Body art. Taijutsu.
Body art.
Taijutsu.
What is it?
Taijutsu.
Taijutsu. I like that. That's great. Because it goes back to no one being the ideal form.
There is no ideal form. And actually, just so you know, the guy that's teaching it today, his name's Hatsumi. Hatsumi's a big fan of there is no ideal form. Hatsumi's a real big fan of there is no ideal form. And that philosophically speaking, there are principles to movement.
Yeah.
There are principles to combat. These are models that we can quickly convey. And then when they happen in the real world, we can point to them and be like, right there it happened. And that's just the way that humans have been memeing. We've been memeing.
Yeah.
But we normally do it through metaphor. We do it through simile. We do it through model. We do it, and we call these things wisdom. Because we can compress complex ideas, convey them simply, and then unpack them and see how they extrapolate in reality.
Yes.
That's all I'm trying to do, is make a condensed system that I can then move. And it sounds like you're already beginning to unpack the system. But you have to go through that time. And I think one of the things that you get from the intensive scenario where we take 2 days, I mean, we were there from 8 to 5, 2 straight days. Have you noticed in working with clients that it's affected your view?
It's affected my view in what I was talking about previously with the ankle versus the foot in terms of being able to hone in even further on specific joints. Specifically with neck, with the feet, the ankles, and the hip versus the pelvis. I think that was was extremely helpful.
What we're talking about are first, second, and third order consequences of a dysfunction. That's really what we're talking about, is the ankle, so the ankle's unstable. A lot of people would say, well, your ankle's unstable, so your bridge collapses. And it's actually the other way around. Your bridge collapses, so your ankle's unstable. So that's your first order consequence.
Your ankle could be unstable. And like you were saying like before, your ankle can be unstable, and that doesn't mean you have a collapsed arch.
Correct. What's also crazy too is you can have a high arch. So you can have an overly tight arch.
Yes.
And wind up with that same hypermobility as a result. So it's about poor control. It's not about high, low, flat. It has nothing to do with that from this perspective. From this perspective, it's about control. Can you control the ankle in space? Simple question.
Yep. I had a new client start a couple weeks ago, and we did the test with the block on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
One leg, so you have to balance on one leg and pick up a block off the ground, which is one of the tests we went over in the intensive.
With the opposite hand.
With the opposite.
Yeah, that's important, but
it is important. It is important. I had these new clients start, couple, and one person with not a collapsed arch, and then one person with a collapsed arch, and both probably about the same success rate. Right. In picking up the block.
So
but in different protocols. So the beautiful part is that when I went to give them their protocols, I could give them different things based on what they need. And so now, instead of being like, oh, ankle, I now can zoom in a little bit further and be like, ooh, I know I can pinpoint the more direct issue to then tie it back into the larger whole.
That's the whole point of the system.
Whole point.
The whole point of the system. And then when you learn, and the reason you learn that first is so you can safely assess a person for higher level movement.
Yep.
You take them through the early calibration so you can safely assess them for higher level movement. Then when you get to the higher level, if there begins to be a problem, you can very easily scale them back, tinker at that stage, and then move back up. And you don't know this, but in the manual that's already been written, and as these things are being defined, I lay out a year-long cycle of preparation, high function, reflection and refinement, and then recovery. So you even move in 12-week phases I actually spend 12 weeks a year in this calibration zone, 80% of it. I still do the higher level movements, but I'm really spending most of my time and energy in this zone. Then we move on to preparation. This is where we start looking at first and second order movement profiles where they're global, but they're not highly complex. Then we get into power, speed, agility development. That's going to happen down here. Then we're going to go back over here and be doing these two types of work at high repetition, but very low intensity. And then we're going to go back to that calibration phase. And if you start getting into those cycles, the idea is it's going to increase your loci of movement further and further out, because in year one, I might be working majorly on just moving my body in space. And by year 5, my warm up in year 2, my year 2 highest level of function is my warm up at year 5.
Yeah.
But it's because it's not interrupted. I am able to go through that biological cycle and not say, no, the weight's always got to get heavier. Weight's always got to get heavier. Performance always needs to go up. It's not allowed to fluctuate. Everything has to go that way. And this goes back to, there was a guy named Louis Simmons who talks about the pulse wave theory. And pulse wave theory is really hard for people to get in conjugate method, and that's for power sports training. But it's not dissimilar. It's very similar. But even high-level bodybuilders have off seasons. They have to rest and recover. They have to do that calibration work. And you just don't see people talking about that at high-level performance training. You just don't see it.
Also, just adding weights, it's very boring.
Yeah, it's super boring.
It's the same movement over and over again.
It also does not translate to athletic performance.
It doesn't, because it doesn't challenge your proprioception.
Right.
Doesn't challenge balance, doesn't challenge coordination, doesn't challenge anything that you interact with in daily life.
Right.
Really. Well, deadlifts, sure. But anywho. Okay. So next steps. Ryan is going to be doing this intensive in Poland next week.
No, not the intensive. I'm just presenting. I'm presenting at EU4YA. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, no. I'm just presenting. No. We're not doing a 2-day seminar. I'll be there for a 2-day seminar, but I'm going to be there with like a lot of the Central European like fitness industry leaders, and we're all presenting something different. And what I'm going to be teaching in a short segment is the specifically our 2 functional movement assessments.
Yes. Okay. I think what I meant to say was that you're going to do this intensive again in another location.
I would like to do this intensive again in Prague near the end of the year. Yeah.
That's what I was getting at.
Yep.
But you know what came out instead? Poland.
Poland. Well, they're both P words. We can do it in Poland. I'll be in Prague. We can do it in Poland if they... To the audience, if you'd like to do it in Poland, we will do it in Poland if that makes sense. So,
I would like steps 4 through 6 in Detroit first. That's my request.
We'll get there. It's not as far away as you think, but some other things need to happen before that's totally finalized.
Fair enough. And if you're in the Detroit area and you want to do restorative strength classes and strength classes with me, I do those classes.
Well, the other thing too is, let's put it this way, since we're talking about this and this is going out to an audience, if there's people out there that want to do this, there's a group of people that wants to do it, and it's enough people, and we have a venue, and we have a reason, and we have everything that we need. I'm completely open to doing this again.
And if the reason is because you want to do it, that is a good reason.
That's a good enough reason for me. I want to do it. So.
Yeah.
All right.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone. And we will talk to you next time.
Yeah, so if you want to learn more about this stuff, DM me, DM her, DM whoever, and we'll get something set up. So, awesome. Thank you. Have a good evening.
Bye.
Bye.